Anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider anywhere within its bounds. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote this on the back of a newspaper as he sat in Birmingham jail in 1963. His message 50 years later is still as important as ever. You hear, "Go back to where you came from," shouted by complete strangers in the street just because somebody looks different. It's a problem that we as a community haven't been able to solve for a very long time. So some examples of microaggressions were shown in the video, but they all target in some way shame differences. So before I go on, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Tony Shoden. I'm a sophomore here. I am transgender and use he, him pronouns. A lot of people don't know that, but they do know me. So you know who I am, but do you really? I mean, I told you 4, maybe 5 pieces of information about myself, and from that I'm sure you can make some assumptions about who I am, but you can't say that you know me. I mean, if you leave today and somebody asks you who spoke at the SADDtalk, you might remember that my name is Tony. You might remember that I'm a sophomore, but you'll probably remember that I'm trans. And that's because we look for differences in people. It's a way of categorizing each other, and it's a way of simplifying who we are. It's the root of microaggressions, that people are different, and that how people are different is the easiest thing to see. So it creates an us and a them, and insiders and outsiders. So either you remember that I'm trans because it was the most relevant thing to my presentation. I'm here representing the GSA, so it definitely does relate. But it might also just be because that is the most glaringly different thing about you and me. I'm trans and you probably aren't. The thing is that there are 1.4 million people in the United States that are estimated to be trans. That's as big as the entire active US military. It's not a very defining thing about me. There are lots of other more interesting things about me that if you get to know me, you can learn. So if I ask you to think of one thing that defines who you are, can you do it? Can you think of one adjective that summarizes all of you? No. I mean, nobody can understand another human being based off of just one word. Identity is a much more complicated idea than just that. And I think Danny has some more stuff to say about perspective.
Hi, my name is Danny. I'm also a sophomore. I'm also transgender and I use he, him pronouns. So I guess first I'll talk about first assumptions. First assumptions are deeply ingrained in people's perceptions of others. When people, for example, when people think that you're a gender that you're not, people think that I'm a girl, there's nothing that I can really do to change that first assumption. I can tell them, oh, I'm a boy, but that if they aren't thinking about it, they're still going to refer to me as she because that's what their subconscious tells them. And it takes time, a lot of time and correction, and for people's perceptions to change. Up until then, and then also afterwards, there's a lot of getting misgendered, being called the wrong name, the wrong pronouns. A lot of people don't know what to do in that situation because it can be kind of awkward. But when you misgender someone, don't make excuses, it's too hard to remember, because that makes that person feel like an inconvenience. A person's identity is never an inconvenience. It's who they are, and that's that. Having said that, mistakes do happen. When you misgender someone, make the correction and move on. Don't make a big deal out of it. It just makes the situation more uncomfortable. And also, don't make it about yourself. For example, I've gotten, oh, sorry, I can't see you as a boy. I see you as a girl. And that's not my problem. I know that I am a boy. Maybe you just need to open your eyes a little bit. Being misgendered isn't great, but neither is dwelling on it, and it's best to try to move on. One thing that's pretty universal is that it's easier to remember people's names when they transition than their pronouns. Because names are one thing that people can't assume about others. When you meet someone, you always have to assume their gender, their pronouns, because that's just not something in society that people generally ask. But if you meet someone and you're unsure of their gender or their pronouns, like, asking is one of the best things that you can do, because it can avoid, like, kind of awkward encounters, like being misgendered. Asking well-intended questions is a good thing. It's so much better to ask than make assumptions. Like, often people will be glad you asked, like, really appreciate it. I appreciate it when people ask me, because it feels so much better than being called something that I'm not. Like, a good question to ask would be like, what are your pronouns? If you're unsure. Maybe a not so good question that I've gotten is like, so have you had surgery for your you-know-whats? Like, that's a little invasive, come on. As a general rule, it's good not to ask about people's genitals. Like, if I wasn't trans, would you ask about my genitals? Like, can you not? So another, like, brief thing is just, I'd like to address slurs. Like, please don't use slurs as a joke. They're not funny. That goes for, like, all slurs, not just homophobic ones, not just transphobic ones. Like, you know, you don't know who's listening, and also it's just wrong. Finally, don't treat LGBTQ people like the other. Don't treat like anyone like the other. We're all just human. And I think that people forget that sometimes. They get so caught up in, like, categorizing people, grouping them together, that nobody can really see how similar we all are anymore. That's why, like, us two are up here. That's why all the presenters are here today. This is all about the power of understanding. Like, just like everything else, it's hard to understand, like, really understand something you've never experienced. I don't expect, like, anyone who's not trans to understand what it's like. That's impossible. That's not what it's about. All I ask for is respect. If you respect who I am, who Tony is, like, who anyone is, well, like, you'll get the same respect back. Life is about understanding, like, how people differ, how we're the same, how we all see the world. Maybe you know about the power of understanding already. Like, maybe this is just the beginning for you, but either way, I hope, like, we hope that you took something away from this, whether it's, like, big or small. Thank you.